No. What he did was wrong. He knew it was wrong. Logic and reason dictated that it was wrong. And any reasonable person would suggest that it was wrong and should never have been done. So, I don't put much credibility in the issue that the reason this happened is because Congress failed to appoint a full-time agency director. We did have interim directors at the time, all of which were charged with accountability for that office, and none of which should be exonerated because they didn't exercise that accountability.
Martha Johnson, in her opening statement, talked about that she used to head up the GSA under Clinton. She left. She came back. She talked about the condition that she found GSA in, and then what she did under her leadership. We'll take a look, and then we'll get your reaction.
Okay.
By the time I was sworn in, a sequence of 4 acting administrators had overseen the agency. What I did not know was that there was yet another problem. The Western Regions Conference, an economical training event in the late 1990s, had evolved into a raucous, extravagant, arrogant, self-congratulatory event that ultimately belittled federal workers. Leaders apparently competed in entertainment rather than building performance capability. The expensive planning for that conference was well underway when I entered GSA, and I was unaware of the scope. Thus, I began my tenure as administrator. As for my part, I set about reconstituting GSA's executive team. Over 3/4 of the senior executives are now in different roles than they were when I arrived. GSA's strategic path is clear. Customers praise us publicly, praise GSA publicly. The labor partnership is fruitful. GSA has email in the cloud. GSA's renovated 1800 F Street headquarters, which held 2,500 people, will be home to 4,500 people next year, allowing GSA to relinquish leases and save millions.
Dennis Ross, your reaction.
Had Ms. Johnson come in after October of 2010, when the Western Regional Conference event took place, I would give some credibility to the argument that there was a culture that she couldn't change and that she came in to now clean up a mess. She was appointed full-time in February of 2012, some 8 months before this event took place. As a leader, she should have stopped it. I don't believe she can stand there today and say that there was so much disarray that in 8 months she couldn't stop what was obviously an event that should have never have taken place, contrary to the regulations of the GSA. She has a wonderful resume. I give her a lot of credit for stepping down when she did. But this culture of hypocrisy, this culture of aberrant behavior that took place under both administrations needs to be corrected. It requires congressional involvement at this point. What's going to be done, I don't know. But Ms. Johnson, as the leader, as the head of the agency, who was there 8 months before this event, could have stopped it.
Charles, a Republican in Lanham, Maryland.
Good morning, you all. Thank you for C-SPAN. It's a great show you guys put on. I'm calling about this Top Hat program, wherein the purchase of consumer electronics, iPods, etc., was done. It's my understanding those purchases were done with purchase card rebates under the GSA purchase card program. They're supposed to administer that darn thing for all the government agencies. In any case, the resources for the Top Hat iPads came from purchase card rebates, my understanding. Now, my question to you, Mr. Ross, is does the government pay to get these rebates? In other words, when the procurement goes out to the banks and the banks bid on the work to furnish the government with these purchase cards, it's my belief that these rebates are not free to the government. The government pays a latent cost for these rebates. Therefore, I urge you in your legislative study of this to, in your next procurement, just eliminate these darn rebates. That'll have two benefits. So get rid of these programs such as this. The government workers make plenty of money. They don't need any of this kind of incentive programs. And two, it'll save the taxpayers money. What say you?
Well, I concur with you. You know, what's interesting is that there are, I believe, 5 event planners for the GSA, event planners for the Government Services Administration. And yet, that's a fact that's hard to believe. But what's really hard to believe is that, irrespective of those 5, the GSA, in this particular occasion, went out and hired their own event planner, who was paid a $12,000 finder's fee for setting up this event at the spa resort, M-Spa Resort in Las Vegas. That's absurd. That's absolutely untenable. And I agree with you. You know, these rebates, if they're done at the government expense, need to be eliminated.
This tweet follows up on the caller who was talking about the GSA scandal was contributed to by the fact that Neely had two different roles and he was able to approve spending, a lack of oversight from the caller. Here's Sasha 2000 on Twitter who says, how many weeks vacation in 2011 for the GOP oversight, question mark. Sort of, I think, asking indirectly here, Congress goes on breaks. Are you doing enough oversight?
I would hope so. I think we've probably been the most active committee in Congress, which most people may say, well, that doesn't matter. That's a relevant term. Just because we're not in Washington, D.C. doesn't mean we're not back home in our district work weeks. I would challenge somebody to follow us sometime at home. We are very busy at home, but doing oversight as well in field hearings. It's interesting that if we had been given a heads up in May of 2011 by then Director Martha Johnson about this oversight or this independent, the Inspector General's report, we might have been able to take a little bit quicker action. We might have been able to do hearings as early as last summer instead of now doing it when it's released in April of 2012.
Durham, North Carolina. Cheryl is joining us. She's a Democratic caller there. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yes, I just don't see much difference between the GSA wasting money and Republican Congress who were getting their salaries and benefits for 3 years, and all they have been doing is saying no to the president. The Republicans have accomplished nothing in the past 3 years.
All right, let's get a response to that.
Well, I've been married for going on 29 consecutive years this August. And my wife and I don't always get along, but we understand that in order to get things done, we have to agree on some things. It's the same way in Congress. The House has to agree with the Senate. There's no one party that can be held liable in this allegation that you make. I think there are two parties, both the House and the Senate, and they have to come to terms. And I think that what you're seeing is an evidence of gridlock that came about as a result of the election of 2010 when the American people spoke up and said, we don't want to go down the path that we've been going the last 2 years. And so the House has been working to change that course. We'll see what happens in 2012.
We're talking with Congressman Dennis Ross, a Republican of Florida, Oversight and Government Reform Committee. He chairs the Subcommittee on Federal Workforce, represents the 12th District, serving in his first term. Joe, an independent in Pennington Gap, Virginia.
Yes, good morning.
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 I have a quick question. Is the GSA the only agency that gets a large bonus for doing their job? I mean, we pay them a good salary, and then we pay their insurance, and we pay their retirement, we give them per diem cards to travel around. How much we have to pay these people?
No, they are not the only agency that gives bonuses. There is what's called, of course, the government schedule, which is a schedule by which people are paid their according salary in most cases with regard to federal employment. But it's one of the areas I would love to see us address. I introduced a bill that would have required that members of Congress reduce their pensions, increase the amount of vesting, years of vesting, and put it in parity with federal workforce and make sure the federal workforce pays more so that we can be in line with what's being done in other governments and state governments and also in the private sector. I was able to get it passed out of the committee. It would save $42 billion, but it's not going to go anywhere. The reason it's not going to go anywhere because it affects those of us that are up here, and that's unfortunate. I agree with you. I believe that there should be performance incentives for people to do good work. No question about that. Because if you're just paid because you're there, you're not going to get the quality of work that one could and should perform. I believe pay for performance is something that we need to explore in order to get the best employment out of our federal employees.
Nelsonville, Ohio. Ron, Republican caller.
Good morning,
Morning, Ron.
Good morning.
The only thing I got to say is a pox on both their houses. They're going to do nothing about this until the next situation arises. Mr. Ross is probably trying, but it's going to be ineffective. We are going to be stuck again with the bill. They are going to do nothing. They're going to rake in their $179,000 a year and steal the public blind.
What do you make of that sentiment?
I think he expresses the sentiment of the majority of Americans out there, and that's most unfortunate. I think it's time that this Congress, let me tell you, these are times that in my lifetime I have not seen as far as the controversy, the partisanship that's going on right now. You raised some very good points. We need to act.